The previous presentation was pretty much me speaking. You've been to lots of sessions this conference where you've had one speaker. This session is a little bit different because I really want you all to get to know each other better, to know that you've got this community. That's what this session is for. We have some topics that were in your description, but I'm not going to talk about them primarily. I really want this to be a discussion type of a session. We can add to these topics. We have 45 minutes, a little less. If there's anything that you definitely want to talk about regarding homeschooling before you leave the conference, this is the session to do that. Yeah. One of the topics in the description is, what are the benefits to classical education in the homeschool of a confessional congregation? In what way does a confessional congregation benefit you as a classical homeschooler? Any thoughts? And we do have to keep responses concise, but any thoughts? How does a confessional congregation benefit you as a classical homeschooler? Yes?
They usually have the pastor has strong law and gospel.
Strong law and gospel, right there in your congregation.
And, we have a Friday matins that he does for us, and then all homeschoolers can come. And it's open to the rest of the congregation too, but it's largely popular.
That's wonderful. Yes, so the willingness and the interest from the pastor to support what you're doing. They know that you're dedicated to teaching the faith, so then having a weekly matins, wonderful.
Yeah, and it's an expert for one of the subjects.
An instant expert for one of the subjects, namely?
Religion.
Yes, exactly. When I went to do my children's high school transcript, I don't remember exactly what I called it, but like historical teachings of the Christian faith, something like that, because we were reading through in our adult Bible class all of the confessions, the Lutheran confessions, the Book of Concord Reader. It took us 3 years, I think, but my children sat in as high schoolers and had, yes, an instant expert. Yes.
We have a line of authorities, so pastor and educator are teaching the same things. We have very consistent catechesis.
Right. They're not hearing one thing versus another. And the odd thing sometimes in parochial schools where you do not have this scenario is, this was eye-opening for me. There's a view that the pastor is not an expert in education. The principal and the classroom teachers, thank you very much, are the ones that know. So he should kind of stay in his camp, and the educators, are the experts, and they should be in another camp. It kind of was, obviously disturbing to me to have that be the case, but one of the directors ended up having like a Good Shepherd Award or something like that to try to shift that back so that they were having pastors who actually support the school and then schools who are supporting the pastor, trying to bring those back. In our confessional congregations, we see that divide much less often. We see it as more, we're all on the same page. We are all wanting the same thing for our children. Yes.
In our experience, the confessional congregation has also been an invaluable source of support just in our seasons of life, providing meals or prayer or childcare. As needs arise, they're very eager to help. It's like a strong understanding of vocation to neighbor. That's wonderful.
The way that for us a confessional congregation was a support is that I was able to partner with the congregation. Even when my children were little, the pastor would send me the hymns when he sent them to the organist. So then I could teach the refrain or one of the simpler hymns that entire week before we got to the church service. And then when they heard it, it was sort of like, that's my song, that's mine. The readings then, as they grew older, we were able to do the readings ahead as well. If you're not familiar, most of you are, but you find out whether it's a 1-year or a 3-year lectionary in your congregation, find out where you are, and then select the readings to become thoroughly familiar by Sunday morning. That helped me too. I had no idea how helpful it was to read the readings ahead before the Sunday rather than just hearing them when your mind's on other things. We also taught the liturgy. The benefit of a confessional congregation is you can do that. It won't be a surprise what will be up, say, on a screen the next Sunday. We know what's going to happen in a liturgical setting. So for my children, they had autism. They liked the predictability. It worked well anyway, but then to be able to teach the components of the liturgy prior to the Sundays, that was also very helpful. Anything else on that topic? Yes.
I think it's helpful in helping my children feel like they're part of the past. There's this continuity of Christians throughout time, which then affects how we view all the books we read.
Yes. Yes. Brilliant. Okay, struggling students. What do we do? How can we help struggling students in the homeschool when we are classically educating? Obviously, this is a topic near and dear to my heart, but have you all found ways to bring a classical education to your struggling student in your homeschool that you might not be able to in a traditional classroom? Yes.
I have one of my kids, I suspect has ADHD. There's another one I'm pretty sure is dyslexic. We just haven't done testing yet. And so with them, I've been able to take, the classical curriculum I have and change the pace of it. And I don't have to go through a committee to change curriculums like I needed to do mid-year. I can just turn on a dime if I have to and respond right away to it.
Yes. And kind of a side note with that, even if you are staying with the same curriculum, but you need to slow the pace and have more repetition, throw in more games until you have mastery and then move on, you have that option too, whereas some other classrooms may feel like they need to just keep moving. Yes.
One of the reasons why we chose to homeschool was because our children were struggling in their school, and they really both benefited from the one-on-one that they needed so desperately in order to succeed. Neither of our boys had learned to read in school and needed to be able to sit down one-on-one and go through it very slowly in order to build that skill, and they weren't able to do that in a larger classroom setting.
Right. And even with the support, like a pull-out support, so you get 30 minutes twice a week or something, that's not what was needed. They needed the one-on-one every day to move through reading and math or whatever was sequential. Yeah. It's one of the top reasons for the rise in homeschooling is to meet the needs of struggling students. And I think the explosion in 2020, in my inbox anyway, was reflective of the realization by parents that what was happening in the classroom really was not at all that kind of one-on-one. In fact, there was a lot of falling through the cracks that was going on. And we had a whole bunch of people who never intended to homeschool suddenly deciding to homeschool and then remaining with it. We were curious to see would that just be, but it has stayed strong. Yes.
You can protect them in a homeschool environment for a time from the negative social impacts too, like the struggles students might have in school. Like our neighbors struggle with the teachers not understanding their struggling student, and it he has very bad experiences, or you'll have other students who might, tease or make fun of or whatever. Really protect them from that.
Yes. Kind of a side note with that one is that you also are protected from the notion that learning is not cool. So if you have someone who's kind of quirky bright or really loves to learn, they just are applauded for that at home, or certainly supported in that. They don't know that would be shunned or ridiculed or certainly not respected as much in another setting. So yes, just the protection. That's a big one too. What else?
We've done oral assessments rather than written for students who are able to take in content, but can't necessarily write out the answers.
Right. And to do that in a classroom, you usually have to have testing that shows that they qualify for such an accommodation. By that time, it's often 2 years in or more. And when you get that permission to do that, it's much more of an ordeal than just knowing you need to do it and doing that. Yes. Anything else? Classical education in the homeschool and struggling students. Yes.
So off of the like one-on-one, we were talking a little earlier about when you work one-on-one with a struggling student and you find that magic key, or finally break down the barrier or teach them the hurdle over it, their complete attitude is different, and all of a sudden they attitude to that.
Yeah, we did classes for homeschoolers at our church, and so I've watched them from part of the journey of the family because the public school just crushed her daughter. So she was about 12, I think, when she started coming to classes with us. And actually, the subject she held on most tightly was Latin after that, because she felt so successful, and she owns it, and she feels competent. And it was interesting. She just turned 16, and she's an entirely different child. Still struggles with some of the special needs that she has, but who she is has completely shifted, and how she approaches learning and people.
We hear that often. I hear that often, that it was the daily tears and the stomach aches and the not wanting to go to school. And a lot of that was the academic failure that was just daily. But then when it is one-on-one or small group and mastery starts happening and confidence starts building, then there is like this freedom to just be a joyful person. And it really is a gift. If you don't know, there is an entire curriculum, the Simply Classical curriculum for special needs, that is classical education in the homeschool for the struggling student. You can use parts of it, you can use the entire package, everything you need for an entire year. So you don't have to feel like you have to modify on your own. If you know the student's going to need a slower pace or more repetition, it's all built in. So that does exist. Sometimes I hear that people didn't know it existed. Yes.
Another resource is that under Classical Academic Press, there is a branch of the tutoring center with special ed teachers as tutors.
There you go.
New resource.
Okay, online classes. Pros and cons. How many of you have used some form of an online class in your classical homeschool? Okay, maybe a third. And how many started but then decided it wasn't for you? Just one. Okay. So what happened with starting it and deciding, I don't think we're going to do this?
It was because of the curriculum. They went through a Connections Academy because even though I'm a credentialed teacher, I was afraid to manage my own house.
So I thought that would be easy, and about halfway through the year, I realized I was changing too much to make it make sense and make it work for my kids. So I'm not able to do them.
Okay. Those of you who stayed with it, why? What are the benefits? What would you say are the pros of using online classes in your classical homeschool? Yes.
Not doing this from the parent perspective, but from the teacher's perspective, because I teach online for 2 different schools, and there's no pretending that, oh, online education, somebody at the computer the whole day is ideal, but rather like I get a lot of parents who, I work during the day and I try to homeschool as best I can, but I can't, I can't teach calculus, or like I can't teach philosophy or something like that. And so just from the teacher's perspective, I've seen a ton of parents benefiting from being able to outsource to a reliable institution, but not doing whole hog. You're going to be in front of the computer 8 hours a day.
Sure. Other pros? Well, we've tried a lot of different ones over the years. So like there are some I've quit and some that I've continued. We did an online year with Orange Lutheran High School, actually, for 1 year with my daughter. But the all online was an awful transition for her as far as social and everything. We've done some classes that are asynchronous, so that they let us be flexible. Those have actually worked out much better for us than the ones that, had you sitting at a computer at a certain time each week that suddenly now our regular lives were interrupted. And then also the variation in the teachers and their ability to follow through with the students. And, we had some that a reasonably responsible student all of a sudden isn't, but we find out much later. Or another one where we find out instantly, so the ability to support them based on how those classes are being run by either the program or the individual student. So I found a wide variety within that, and I have a set of criteria I use now to look at it and look at my student, how independent is my student, that kind of thing.
It's interesting. It's very similar to sending a child to school. They're not all the same. Other benefits of using online courses.
For me, it helped the relationship with my daughter because she's her first year was just this last year, and she was a freshman. And we don't always get along well. There's a lot of tension at times. And so because I was not her teacher, I was not the bad guy in certain times. Like, I'm not the one giving you the deadline. Your teacher's giving you the deadline. I'm the one helping you meet the deadline. So I got to be a facilitator. I got to be more hands-on than if she were in a full brick-and-mortar school every day. But I also got to participate in a different way than just purely homeschooling in my house with no additional people involved. So I did appreciate that role, which was just a little bit different and helped us. Because then we were doing this together differently than we are by the instructor as well. So, all right, well, what is the expectation from your teacher? How can we meet this expectation? But it also was hard for me to keep my hands out of things sometimes. Like, well, no, she has to do this on her own too. Like, well, we should really tweak this. No, wait, I got to see what your teacher's going to say and then see how she responds to that. So it was an interesting dynamic, I think, but for the most part, it helped our relationship.
I could see that. And even if things are going swimmingly, sometimes it's just nice for the student to have a different teacher and then classmates. So usually we suggest trying just 1 or 2 online classes. Don't start with 6 hours a day. And most people find that that's just too much. And if you've ever had a day-long Zoom meeting, you know that it really is just too much screen time. But 1 class is good because then, like you said, you can sort of be the coach. I'll help you plan this out. Your deadline is here. We can work this out. I'll give you more quiet time tonight so you can finish that or whatever. But if the load is too intense at first, then that's usually when the online classes just cease. So 1 or 2 to start, usually in the student's area of strength also can be good, or in the teacher's area of weakness, so that you have someone capable. Yes, in the back.
Obviously, we very much tiptoed in, and are still, I would say, tiptoeing in stage for some of this. One of the things that we had the luxury of is my sister had previously taught at a classical school. It was not Lutheran. And so our first foray into this was actually her teaching literature remotely to our oldest daughter. And so then, we know who the person is, we have a relationship. It also then provided that benefit for their relationship to continue to grow despite the fact that, they're 8 hours away. But then the other thing that we found helpful was actually for preparation. So we had our oldest did the National Latin exam, and our son did the National Theology exam. So having some exposure to that, even just for the sort of preparation for those exams, it kind of gave, okay, we've gone through our curriculum, we've gone through aspects. Here's an opportunity for a very short duration to kind of have that exposure. Yeah.
Like the online academy national Latin exam prep class. Like, try it. It's only a few weeks long. So
if it's terrible, then you know, right? But it sort of gives you that perspective of, okay, what's it going to be like? What logistically is this going to look like in terms of how we're figuring this out? And then you're not even biting off a whole semester's worth of classwork to kind of figure out if it's good or not.
Right, great idea. Anything else on online classes? Okay, how to avoid the pitfalls of homeschooling? First of all, what are some pitfalls of homeschooling that you've encountered? Yes. Yeah, trying to make the entire house a school, right. That can be a pitfall. We didn't have a separate schooling room. So at one point we had the chart of Latin grammar, the declensions and conjugations, right near where we ate. We had a seminary student from Concordia, St. Louis over for dinner. He said, "This is awesome. I can practice my Latin right here while I'm eating dinner." But for some people it wasn't quite so awesome because our schedule, everything was up on the big whiteboard, and it still was better. He loved it. This is Michael, my son. But at one point I decided, we really need to have our eating area be our eating area. And if I need to make posters and hold them up or something, but yes, so that can be a downfall, especially if, say, your whole dining room is just piled with books and you never are able to have anybody over at all. That can be a problem. It's not the great modeling really that you want necessarily, unless of course you have a system where you move them all and then you just have people over. That can work. But yes, so that's a pitfall. How do we avoid that? How have you all solved that problem?
Cupboards and baskets.
Cupboards and baskets and bins. Yes. Organization, really. Just keeping things in their proper place, right? Yes.
We invite people over so then we clean the house.
I tried that comment once when the girls were little, started vacuuming, and I said, "Oh, Mommy, who's coming over?" The only time I would vacuum was somebody really over.
Company's coming.
Yeah.
There's the vacuum.
I was like, "Oh, wow, that's a teaching moment right there for me."
What's another pitfall of homeschooling to avoid?
Becoming disorganized.
Becoming disorganized.
Becoming disorganized.
Yes. When I was thinking of a list, I thought of being overwhelmed, overextending, overbuying. It was just kind of like just too much. That homeschooling can become too much, or you're not paying enough attention to your spouse, your friends, your neighbors, you're not exercising. It's kind of like you're just all in, and it's so easy to do. I don't really know why, but it is. We love our kids, but we really love the homeschooling. I don't know, but it is something to be careful with, that we don't forget about the things that need to be done. But then the benefit of homeschooling, so how to avoid it, is that everybody starts pitching in. Everybody learns to do the chores. And the chores in our house, chores became recess because it's a break from doing the academic work. And I'm like that too. If I'm loading the dishwasher, but I happen to be writing an article or something, it sort of percolates while I'm doing that sort of task. That's how you can avoid it, by having cooking, cleaning, laundry. My daughter has been the laundry sorter for quite some time. Quick story. If she were here, she would really want me to tell this, so I will. It's just the fruit of homeschooling coupled with my daughter who has autism and her different mind. But she was 7, little pigtails. I can still see the day. She was sorting the family's laundry on the living room floor. And there were different piles, but we only have 4 people. There were more than 4 piles. I wondered how she was sorting it. It's just such a classic homeschool family story. So it wasn't by color. I could tell that. I thought maybe she's sorting by all the tops and all the bottoms. It wasn't by that. It was not by person. There were far too many. She was sorting by the country of origin. Thailand, Sri Lanka, Germany. We had been doing continents, countries, and all right, another pitfall is curriculum hopping. That's so common because you get the flyers, you go to conferences, not like this one where it's more cohesive, but you go to, say, the large homeschool conventions, which are, they can feel like carnival atmospheres. And it's just so tempting to just say, I'll take that, I'll take that, I'll take that. And then you try it and you think, I don't really like that. So you just keep buying. 2 ways to avoid that. One is to go with something cohesive. They call it curricular cohesion, where they know where they're starting and they're taking you to a place. If you find something that you love and stay with it, you're much more likely to have the mastery because of the scope and sequence, the map that takes you where you want to go. If you're not wanting to do that with an entire curriculum, then at least if you pick, say, grammar or spelling, you want something that does have that map that will take you all the way through, and then try to stay with that for that whole subject. The only time I found curriculum hopping helpful is when, say, my daughter needed more help with writing. And if we were to move up, it would just be too high. But I didn't want to just jettison everything. So I would curriculum hop over horizontally to find something else at that level. And then we could go back and then we could continue. Any other pitfalls that you've run into? Yes.
Keeping schedules. So I've been after 2 years and I got started with high school boys. So trying to learn how to run a schedule when they have their extracurriculars, but you get the stick with the curriculum. It's just, oh, you got this week, you got this week, you got this week. I'm like, we're behind.
Right. Sticky notes. Really, whenever you stop, wherever you stop, just put a mark, and that's where you pick up. That's what I've heard from large families, busy families the most is don't worry too much, just do the next thing. But you have to have a mark somehow, bookmark or whatever you want to do, paper clips, something to mark where you left off and then go. But also big families have found, I'm told, that, or busy families, early morning is just the secret. Just like for a lot of us, when we get up early and we tackle it, then at least we know those main things are done. Then if we start getting busy or distracted, then at least you know that you've done what's needful for the day. As I know that's harder with high schoolers because they want to sleep in, but some high schoolers are bent to get up early. The ones that are, you can take advantage of that. perhaps. Yes.
Yeah, I've struggled with like scheduling and organization, and I've had different approaches. I've had a very rigid schedule, and then I've switched to really almost no schedule at all and more kind of a list approach where everybody has their things I have to do and it just takes however long it takes and we get through what we get through and so on. But lately, in the last few years, I found what works best for us is really like a hybrid. I do have certain things that are scheduled, but I use the CPH school planners and just for me, it's prep. I have to prep like at least the night before the week starts. Like if I have it by Sunday night, then it's not so good. But if I can, before the week starts, write in each student, each child's planner for the week, exactly what lessons, what pages in each of the core books they have to do. Like I write their lists, and then it's their responsibility. And by the end of the week, like next time I look at it, when the week has passed, they should have crossed everything off. And then I can check it, like any tests, quizzes, any like kind of, or homework assignments, any checkpoints where I'm evaluating, I can see, okay, I need to just check those to see where they are. And it kind of shifts responsibility onto them to get the work done. But we do have a plan and a schedule, and I feel more organized, and that kind of has worked for us. Like.
That makes sense. It's true. Some things really do need to be scheduled. Math, teaching reading, you want to make sure you're doing that when they're little. You want to do that daily. When they have become good readers, then it's Latin, and you want to make sure that's daily. So Latin, usually Latin, math, and music. If they're playing a musical instrument, you want those things to be daily and really structured and kind of the non-negotiables. In our house, exercise was one of those two. They had to hit that treadmill or elliptical. They alternated. And then after that, yes, then there's a routine or a list of things that you hope to accomplish. And if you don't, if you move them to the next day, that's going to be okay. But
And the biggest non-negotiable schedule thing for us is our morning devotion. That's the very first thing we do. It's at 7:30 in the morning, and sometimes the kids even haven't had breakfast. Sometimes they wake up at 7:25, but at 7:30 we do devotion, and then they, but that's just that.
yes,
And that really helps me because that's just, we've done the important thing and we've done it on time. And
yes.
even if I've only gotten up to 7:25, 7:30, I'm in my pajamas, all the devotions in my pajamas.
That's right.
Get on with it.
I learned that the hard way. I started thinking, my children know a lot about the scriptures at this point compared to, say, peers, just because of the advantages we had. So maybe I should defer that to an enrichment kind of place. And it just wasn't long before things deteriorated. It was kind of like what Pastor Paul was talking about with the academics, say the classics, not taking the priority. He likened it to the food pyramid where, okay, you've got your fats, oils, or sweets or whatever, but the basis, the main thing you want to be doing is teaching the faith. That's one of the main reasons we started doing this. So that needed to set the tone for my entire day for me. Especially, I even called our middle school, those are our roughest years. I called our middle school Grace Lutheran School. Just this is the focus. We memorized Ephesians 1:1 to 2:10 during those middle school years. That was my husband's recommendation. And it was really exactly what we needed, just to remember that we are seated in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, that he has redeemed us. It was a relief to start the day that way, not feel like I'm behind, I'm just following a checklist, but to start that day. And then if there were medical things or whatever came up, at least we had done that. Yes, very good point.
When working a schedule or a school year, what's best with homeschooling? Is it a year-round thing? Is it you take the summer months off? How I've just struggled with it. I struggle with many things at homeschooling, but that's one of them.
It's a family by family decision. And also you have to look at the age of your children. When they're kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they're just learning to read. You don't want to say, "Oh, no more reading till September." That really won't work. They need to be reading out loud daily, 100 books over the summer, little bitty books, that kind of thing. Or if you've got struggling learners, you'll see regression if you just say, no math over the summer. So we always, in our family, we always had light school. We live in Missouri. July and August were super hot anyway. So we usually took a lot of May off. May is sort of like resort-like in Missouri. And our local schools get out so early in May that I didn't want our kids to feel like here they had this drudgery and their neighbors are running around already. So we took May off. We never took more than 8 weeks off for us. But then we did start back up when it would get hot. And, but we just worked on those essentials to make sure that those stayed strong. And then it wasn't too taxing for anybody. It was maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, and we were finished. So there's plenty of time still for barbecues and swimming and fishing and doing nothing, kind of just that worked well for us. A lot of homeschoolers do go year round because of what you talked about, that it just seems like there's so many interruptions. Grandma needs us. Well, we're going to drop everything and go see grandma. So if you have the mindset that you're free to take a few days here or there, then you can make it up if you're schooling year round. But then other families feel like the mom really needs a break, or dad, and so do the children. We're going to have a traditional summer, and then they do fine with that. So I think it just depends on the family. Yes.
For us, the scheduling flexibility and being able to take some of those dates was another big reason why we ended up homeschooling. Because my husband's a pastor and we never have Sundays off. We can't ever leave for a weekend. Being able to do like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday and not have to worry about school on Thursday and Friday when we do that was like, oh, right. This will actually make it work for our family so much better than if we try to stick ourselves to Monday through Friday. We have to do school, then our family only ever has a chance at one day together, everybody. So, like being able to figure that out on a week-to-week basis, or be able to plan vacations or things like that, and push out some of the things rather than be stuck to Monday to Friday was big for us.
Yes, flexibility, for sure. Yes.
I was just gonna say, I need summer vacation badly, probably because I do too much during the school year. But we take a good summer, but the couple things that, at least as we're kind of working our way through the last 2 years figuring out, is my kind of non-negotiables about it are the school books. The books that we're going to complete a book in a year have to be finished. And so usually the end of the school year doesn't so much have a definitive end date in my house as a trickle to the finish. And so anyone who stared at the sky through one too many math lessons finds himself doing 2 weeks of math when everybody else is done with school. I'm thinking of a particular child this particular year, right? So there's an incentive to get the work done. And they understand they're not still doing their schoolwork because mom's just being mean. It's because you're not finished with your book yet. But then like this year, after kind of busy June of camps and activities, we instituted 30 minutes a day. I actually set a timer for any kid who's diligent. They need to stop when it's done. Of something mom knows they either need to brush up on, get ahead on, or with my 3 kids right now, one kid is getting ahead on something, one's like keeping their Latin fresh, and the other is catching up on some of the learning to read things that, we're at 6, we needed a break. And that's been kind of good structure for us, hoping that those things will still be fresh and mom won't be completely worn out by managing school all summer.
Very good. Right. What a great compromise. One time, my daughter has a learning disability in math, so she always had to keep the math fresh. But I didn't want to be too regimented over the summer or make it feel too awful. So I created this big bingo chart. It was called 50 days, math many ways. So she could do something. It was maybe a few pages in a workbook or whatever, and then color in the square. Then that way she could see when she would be finished. She knew she had 50 days to do it, and it was more motivating. So yeah, something creative like a 30-minute timer. How intimidating is that? That's certainly fair. So very good. Okay, really quickly, cottage schools. How many are a part of a cottage school currently? How many are thinking they might want to start one someday? Good. Okay.
Explain cottage school.
Cottage school, we talked about it in the first session, but just briefly, maybe it's one day a week where you go to school, the lessons are taught, you only have a few subjects that you teach. Often people will do, say, Latin, history, geography, and literature, something like that. It's not usually teaching a child to write or teaching math. Usually it's more things like that. And then during the week, the family picks up where the lesson left off. So the benefit to a cottage school is that you have some accountability. So you know that on Monday, everybody will have done their homework and we're going to move to the next lesson. So it keeps you kind of on track. You have peers, you have some teachers, and it can be kind of the best of both worlds, especially if you have, like in our setting, if it were all Lutheran families, and it doesn't have to be a bunch. Like Claudia, you had 2 at one point. We often used to call them co-ops, but the cottage school, I like the term better because it's implying that we're not just having, say, a class in Legos, but it is a school. So that could be 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and the others are homeschool days. They're just popping up around kind of all over, yes.
I have a question. Do you is the source of the teaching the parents themselves, or do you outsource some of that?
The parents themselves usually teach in the models that I'm most familiar with. You choose a curriculum, say Memoria Press. There are a lot of Memoria Press cottage schools. Those are the ones I've seen. Everybody's using the same, whatever it is, like the same literature guide. They may teach the vocabulary for that literature, read through it, say, on that cottage school day, and then everybody does the comprehension, the discussion questions, and the guide at home and reads the chapters assigned, and then you pick up on the next time. There's probably a better way to describe that, but yes.
So we used to be in someone called a hybrid school as opposed to a cottage school because it was 2 days a week there and the remaining 3 days of the week was.
And it was all subjects.
And it covered all subjects and kind of, so they sort of did the curriculum selection and things like that, that kind of went along with it. And the one thing that I was going to say is we had this sort of reflection, actually, around the birth of our 4th child, that there were a lot of appeals to it because that daunting aspect of picking curriculum was not something that we had to deal with. We could be a part of things, yet they also had additional authority figures, and that part was really nice. The problem is, while you do sometimes get the best of both worlds, you will also sometimes get the worst of both worlds. And so, for instance, so she was actually working on spelling lesson word for the upcoming week while laboring. And then, because our kids were going to school those 2 additional days during the week, there was work that had to be done that had to be turned in at their next school day that we still had to do.
3 days.
Right. So it's, so anyway, at the time of the reflection, we said if we were in a full-time school, we wouldn't be having to do this stuff kind of during the day with the new baby. If we were homeschooled, we would have just taken that week or 2 off and sort of reflected and instead. We kind of had to keep going, even though that was kind of a really hard time to do that. So there are no solutions, only trade-offs.
Yeah. Right. Yes. I have
done them on and off almost the whole time, a lot of different things, sometimes counselors teaching, sometimes people who are retired teachers or different things offering their church. I think especially things that were helpful were like writing classes where they had peers, where they actually cared about, it's not just mom, but the advantage of having them in classes for writing, where they cared about what their peers thought about their writing, made me excited about that. That was one where I was like, that makes my life easier. And different subjects like that where we kind of inspired them differently than what was going on at home, but always like a little mixture of it, and I loved the ability to pick and choose what those were.
One thing I have noticed in cottage schools is if you plan to start one, is to, just as a tip, rather than do it by grade per se, which really isn't a classical approach necessarily anyway, but have everyone doing the same thing at the same time. So maybe everyone is doing, if you're teaching math, that everyone's doing math at the same time, then everyone's doing literature at the same time, everyone's doing Latin at the same time. The reason is then it gives you the flexibility within that to move up or down. So let's say that you teach Latin. If somebody comes in and he's in 5th grade, but he's never had Latin, he can't just jump in with the kids that have had it for a few years. So he can go to the intro to Latin class and then move at his own pace. Similarly, someone may be advanced at 9 or 10 and could move to a higher one, or someone might be a struggling student, then you can move them. Having the flexibility built in from the structure is super helpful. Another thing that I have noticed working with cottage schools is that it's very good to have placement tests prior to enrolling, because one mother may say, my son is advanced in math, and she's really just comparing to maybe how she was in math or how the sister is in math or something. You really have to have some kind of measurable way to know where to properly place a child so that you're not in a situation where you have to move the child back, say 2 levels or something. The Simply Classical curriculum has free readiness assessments online, simplyclassical.com. You can use those. Even if you don't teach from that curriculum, you can use those as placement tests for cottage schools. That's what I've started recommending because I haven't really found anything that's just an objective, easy, free way to place kids somewhere. Let me see if there was anything else. So place properly from the beginning, allow for fluid movement by having a block schedule, and then partner with your pastor so that you are creating a Lutheran cottage school. If that's important to you, which I assume it is, or you wouldn't be here, then it's okay if you only have 2 or 3 families. We have a cottage school we're working with, and in order to grow the numbers, get the right tuition, they had to have other people who maybe weren't like-minded join, and it became kind of a frustration. Again, like you said, why am I doing this? They decided rather than have the hassles of running a school, they would choose a different alternative to starting their own school. So it's a lot to think about. There are a lot of resources here. Nathaniel and Joy Pullman, who started this school, they were homeschoolers. Then they started this school. They would be a great couple to talk to. And I have found everybody is just so generous that nobody minds sharing what they have learned. All right, we are out of time, but we got a little bit of a late start. So I am going to say, if there's any other topic, let's just throw it out there. Is there anything that you really wish you would have been able to discuss during the conference or during the session, but you just haven't quite worked out yet? Yes.
I was just going to encourage people, like, parents are homeschooling a child. And so even if, and I'm not the one who does most of the lesson, I'm not the one who does, I'm not doing lesson planning. I'm currently not teaching directly in any of the classes. But also remember that there has to be an agreement and discussion. And the other thing is that the two personalities in your marriage are often very complementary, right? There's a reason the two of you are together. So sometimes something that one person sees, the other person doesn't see it that way. And as long as that can be a conversation with respect, a lot of times you can find that it really helps a lot just having that, I don't call it an outsider's perspective, but an additional perspective from the person who's already partnering with you and raising your children.
So true. We saw that in our homeschool. I love a schedule. You were talking about how do I schedule? I love schedules. That was very easy for me. I set the schedule. We followed the schedule. But my husband, he didn't want to have anything to do with the lesson planning. He certainly didn't want to be handed a book and then teach from the lesson. That just was not him. But he was the pile on the bed, and we're going to read the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy one summer guy. And then he read, yes, with The Hobbit too. And he read Shakespeare just, on a whim, showing more delight, that it doesn't have to be so planned out, but this is just, I want to do this because I want to do this, and it's worth doing. That was a really wonderful addition to our homeschool that I couldn't have planned for. Yes.
My son Lucas just wanted me to tell you all that he thinks it's very beneficial to do catechism memory work as part of our devotions every day. He's really reaping the benefits of that in confirmation class.
Yes, we did that too. Yes. Lucas, yes, you are so right about that. And starting in 4th, 5th, 6th grade so that you have those things down. That our pastor gave us 2 summers ahead before our catechism classes, before confirmation classes, and especially with special needs. That was so helpful. Yes, very good point. All right. Thank you very much.